even if I was the smartest person in the room, which I hope I never am, because then what am I there to learn? But even if I was the smartest person in the room, it doesn't mean that I am the person that's going to be able to get that through to someone, or that someone's going to explain it a better way that gets us to where we're going. So I always view my office as a team. We are a team with our police officers. We are a team in my office, my staff, all of that. We are a team, and we always work together.
111, 110.
You training to be a street cop?
Grace Simpson, tell us who you are and why we're together today.
Well, we connected at the Street Cop Conference in Nashville. And when I was there with a deputy from my county, and my fiance is also a police officer. So they convinced me that they went the first 2 years ago as well. And we're like, this is something you have to go to. You'll love it. You will connect with it. And so they convinced me to go to Nashville. And in Nashville, I was outside getting my coffee, and I walked by you and wanted to just introduce myself, because I felt like I had was maybe a minority of the type of people that were there. And then we ended up here.
Did you like the conference?
It was awesome. It was so cool to see how my officers get inspired. What is it that makes them want to be police officers and continue to go out and work every single day for, whether that be different types of approaches, different ways to talk to people. And it was really helpful for me to understand, why my officers do what they do on the road. So why are they asking this question? So I can articulate on a stand to a jury of 12 people that have no idea why an officer would do something, why they would do it. Because I've seen juries just go south because the officer clearly wasn't scared because he approached on the driver's side, or something silly like that, where an officer can just explain very easily, hey, I approach on the passenger side because it's of safety reasons, and we can move on. And so I can explain to juries or a judge why an officer felt unsafe because, he always does X and this time he did Y, or interview tactics. There was a lot of things presented on how, front seat interviews and why you ask certain questions and, to create that storyline. And so now I can see when people deviate from their stories, when they are not telling the truth, how my officers know that. And now that can make a script for us on the stand to better explain it to people, to get us across, that finish line for convictions instead of plea deals.
So refreshing conversation to have with somebody who is actually on our team, which you should be as a prosecutor. Wouldn't you think, as a district attorney or a state's attorney or a county attorney, that you would, or an attorney general, that you essentially would be, since you're part of the law enforcement division, a pro-law enforcement person to work together with law enforcement to prosecute crimes and stop criminals. Now, we haven't done this yet, but tell us about you. Who are you?
So I am the youngest state's attorney woman elected in my state. I took office in 2020. I went to law school at Southern Illinois University in Carbondale. And from there, I did some internships and fell in love with prosecution. It's what I've always done. And I was an assistant state's attorney, which in some other states is called a district attorney. And I worked in Henry County, which I worked in their traffic and then felony division. And then that's when I decided to run for a state's attorney. Like I said, I took office in December of 2020, and I've been here ever since. And I love it. I'm running again in November of 24 is my election. And, I think police officers feel the same way, that it's kind of an exhausting job, but, there's really some reward. And this is an office that has to have someone who's going to want to make a difference and fight for all of the other people that make my job possible. I am engaged to a police officer. His name is Scott, and my family farms. I farm with my family. I'm just a small town Midwest girl who ended up in a place where I feel like I can make a difference.
How do you feel about how you've been received by the community you swore to uphold the law with?
I think my community was frustrated. And it took about a year or two to really start getting the convictions we wanted, because the cases that were pending when I came in here, they were good cases. But, I inherited someone else's, there's a lot of strategy to prosecution. So there were promises that were made, or, search warrants that had been done that I didn't love how they were done, or things like that. That's a transition thing. You have to go through it. Just recently we got 45 years on a predatory criminal sexual assault case, went to trial. Most recently in May, we had a guy sentenced for a murder for hire for 33 years. And we took that case to trial 3 different times. So there would have been every reason to just say, I can't, this isn't working. I had a confidential informant who was a Fed guy that the Fed kind of fought with me to give me. We had a hung jury once, but just because it's a maybe doesn't mean it's a no. So it was a serious case, and we wanted a yes or a no, and we got it. So I think the community is seeing a difference now, and I hope that continues, because I always tell my police officers, including or other victims that find themselves in connection with my office, that we operate with the mindset that this is going to trial. And I want all my officers to do that, because I want them to be operating that their body cam is going to be seen in a court of law. Their actions, their explanations, they're all going to be there. It's not just going to plead out. And so when we plead because we have decided to do that, not because we had a discovery violation or a motion to suppress, or, and I find that everyone acts differently when they know that. When they feel supported, people act differently.
That's wonderful. What are some things that when they come across your desk, you appreciate on behalf of the police?
Everything. But when I know everyone gets excited when we find something, when my officers treat people like humans, and they could have, they were horrible to them, or when they keep their composure, I always thank them. When I get reports that are complete and, tell me a story of why they felt in danger, of, I don't want to know that they just got kicked. I want to know that that they felt threatened beforehand, and that they said X, Y, and Z to them. And when officers approach me or are, very forward with me about, I don't want this case to plead, I really appreciate that, because I can approach it in a completely different manner. Because ultimately I wouldn't be sitting here if it wasn't for them. So I want to know what they want to do. So I really like when we have an open door policy, and when, how they feel or what they did comes across, and when they're in their reports, and when they are, kind to people who didn't deserve their kindness, because that says a lot more about them than it ever does about, those people. And our small community knows how those people act. They know where they live, they know where they're at, and I notice it, and I hope that other people do too.
As somebody who's engaged in judicial practice, which we all are in some sense, maybe different roles, but there are certain things that I think we all need to understand and possess as far as knowledge goes. In your opinion, how important is it for a police officer to be familiar with precedent and case law when making decisions in the field? And on top of that, how many people do you think actually have no idea what the rules are?
I would say about 50-50. I think if people recognize how important it is that case law exists and what it is, and when it applies and when it doesn't, it's really important. And it's helpful to me, because I can tell when they point out that I felt I had, reasonable suspicion to stop this. And then, at this point, I felt I had probable cause to search the vehicle. Like that tells, I can pick up on that in reports. Boom, boom, boom. And so I can tell in their writing when they know, and when they don't know, it's just chaos. It's like, I stopped this vehicle and I searched it, and we've skipped over
right. Yes.
Driver and maybe that person had a warrant and it's only in the dispatch notes or something like that. And I have to go searching for it. So I can always tell. And I would say about 50% in general, not just at our departments, know about it. And the other 50 are, some old school or just, well, this is how it's always been done. And sometimes they're right that, they had the probable cause, but it makes it harder for me to argue on behalf of them that they were doing X based on this precedent. And so I think it's really important to know those things. I know it's hard to keep updated with them, but I get emails every month and I send them out to at least the police departments that I know are utilizing them. And I have officers here who can quote case law to me. And I enjoy that very much.
Yeah, and my suggestion is I always tell these guys, they're like, hey, man, we know more case law than our prosecutors do. I'm like, well, that's okay. You got to remember that you're on the same team. So we have to, at least what I appreciate about the last statement that you made is that you've deployed enough humility to sit there and listen. And even though you might have a law degree, you might say, you know what, I was unfamiliar with that. I'm glad you brought it to my attention. Let's continue to work together. What I've learned in my career is, how dare you talk to somebody who passed the test and has a certificate in a frame that made my mom really happy. So if we want to start playing this game of who you are versus who I am, that's how we never progress forward. And unfortunately, probably 95% of prosecutors that I've ever interacted with have had that bravado of, oh, you don't know who you're talking to. I'm the lawyer here. We can't be like that, and vice versa for the cops as well. So it's very frustrating when people come to our courses, get educated properly, bring it back, and some of your prosecutors have never read case law at all. You have chiefs of police and captains and lieutenants and sergeants who have never even heard of what case law is. And this is why I push it so much, because not only does it create solid cases and proper constitutional action, it creates a more respectable police officer. So when they're being put through the gauntlet of questions of why did you do that, why did you do this, they can support their actions based on factual data and guidelines that the court gave them to act that way. And it's crazy. Some people might look at it and go, you can't do that. Well, yeah, no, here's 3 cases right here that say I can do that.
Yep.
And so you can not like what you hear on the receiving end of that, but what you can do as the person who's defending it, or defending the actions, or explaining the actions. I don't want to say defend, it's just that natural police instinct to go there because you're always defending yourself as a cop, is to say, that's why I like when people have conversations beforehand. That's why I like when command staff comes to my classes. I was just contracted recently here at a I don't want to say it publicly, at an agency in New Jersey. And for 2 days, I taught both sides of their agency. One side was working the road, the other side came in. So it was split 50-50. There's 2 sides of me when I go out and teach, and it's like, how did you not know this? But 2, I'm glad that you had me come. And you could see, and their chief is phenomenal. And the response I got back from the chief was, we have to change some things. I go, I'm trying to get you guys compliant with the law. You're violating it nonstop. You have no idea that you're doing it, but all you got to do is follow the rules and we can win the right way. Mm-hmm. Because, 98%, 99% of people that are going to get in trouble in this town aren't going to show up here with a hotshot $4,000 suit wearing Ferrari driving lawyer who knows case law like the back of her hand. But what's fortunate for you is we can do the best because we do that on your behalf to ensure that when that guy shows up, you'll have some answers. You'll be able to explain some of the things. And so they were very receptive. And I appreciate that you're receptive as well. When you say 50-50, I think you're giving a lot of credit. And I understand that you might have to. I would actually argue it's probably like 99%, 1%. And you don't have to respond to that because I understand your position as a public person. But that I say that because I care. I don't say that because I think I'm hot shit or I think I'm smarter than you are. I say that because I know this little secret of how important it is to know this stuff. And that's why I think you should know it as well. Let's talk about the reality of what the detriment is of not knowing case law. So what is the detriment of not knowing case law?
Well, so I think it's about 7-fold. So 2 things that came to my mind when you were talking about that is that, you mentioned it's really a nice feeling that I'm receptive to that. Because even if I was the smartest person in the room, which I hope I never am, because then what am I there to learn? But even if I was the smartest person in the room, it doesn't mean that I am the person that's going to be able to get that through to someone, or that someone's going to explain it a better way that gets us to where we're going. So I always view my office as a team. We are a team with our police officers. We are a team in my office, my staff, all of that. We are a team and we always work together. So if you can explain it a better way, case law is confusing. I mean, you and I can both talk about the same case and explain, the takeaways from it are the same, but we're going to have to make that fit facts of ours someday or sometime. And so I always view that as a team thing. And that my job is not to decipher the facts. One of the things I've done since I have taken office is that my officers have done a great job of really painting a picture for me of, what that traffic stop felt like. I've gone to scenes, which I had never, done before. And I don't know that they do in a lot of bigger counties, so that I can realistically feel how fast these cars are going by someone, or, any sort of situational thing that would affect what my officer did and why. Why we moved a motor vehicle to search when, an argument arises that our probable cause dissipated, or, whatever that may be. Going to those scenes has been amazing in putting what I need to on paper. So, even though I view it from an office standpoint, my officers are applying that case law in real life. And so even if we both know the same case, we can make a different connection in a way to address emotion. And so those are, two really important things to, even if you both know the case law, there has to be that extra step. And my role, I've always felt, is to aggressively get us across the finish line to whatever that may be. So I think of myself as almost a liaison between my officers and the court. Because like I said, I can't do it without them, without good work from them. If they don't believe in me and I don't believe in them, what are we doing here? But, so moving forward, the detriment to not knowing those things is that your case gets dismissed. You lose that motion. You leave that court feeling empty-handed. And so, when I first got here, I would leave a courtroom and officers would be like, well, they told me that, or I knew that from prior contacts with this person. And that wasn't and so by understanding what we would need to prove, to get over what they were trying to suppress or what they were not connecting, we, figured out that we needed to file prior bad acts motions or case law on, other contacts with identifying a defendant, or knowing from reliable sources in a search warrant using someone as a confidential informant, knowing what we needed to put where and which case law, because 9 times out of 10, your officer knows those things. We just didn't ask them because, we didn't know that they knew that person from high school or that they had this background contact with them because we were looking at one report from one instance. And so if my officer knows the case law and I know the case law and we've met and decided what we need and we know the totality of what's going on, we're there all the time. We cross that finish line 100% of the time when we do those things. So the detriment to not knowing that and to not connecting the things you need to are that your case gets dismissed, is that justice, that moving forward, that whatever your goal is unattainable.
When you were talking earlier about interpreting the case law, I think that what we do and I hate to call us legal experts, but I guess in some sense, myself and 4 or 5 other instructors at this company would be considered, if we were actually put to the test on a roundtable discussion or a panel of people pressing us under the 4th Amendment, certainly some 5th and certainly some 14th, that we would probably prove that we are smarter than the average bears. And that's not a humble brag. That's saying have confidence in when we look at this stuff. I've been reading case law for 15 years now. I'm reading less now, self-admittedly, because I have to run this company. I'm actually coming out of the field a lot more. I've been handing over a lot of stuff to our other legal experts in here because they do a fantastic job, because I know what my role has changed again in this company. So often at times we'll look at something and try to, because the courts don't really understand that when you hand down opinions, we're trying to figure out what you meant by that, unless you sometimes, which they'll do, is give a very, very simple explanation of what was right, what was wrong. At other times, I don't know why judges like to do this, but they like to keep you guessing, like almost like some kind of Shakespearean sonnet of what did they mean by this. So we have to spend time trying to depict what was meant, because we don't get to sit there when they gave their opinion and say, wait, what do you mean by that? Does this still count? Does that still count? And unfortunately, when something gets addressed, not everything gets addressed. There's still a lot of stuff left open for interpretation. And what you have to do is you have to take your pre-existing knowledge of the Fourth Amendment or your state constitution and how it's been interpreted, and or whatever other civil acts have been, legislative acts have been put in place. You have to try to like figure out, what do they mean by this? What's the best path to take that makes the most sense, where we can ensure that what we're doing is going to stand solid in court. Let me also say this. That doesn't mean every time you come to an impasse, you just go, all right, let's just play it safe and get a warrant. Let's just play it safe. You could know a lot. When you hear that phrase of let's just play it safe and get a warrant, I don't know, so we'll do nothing. That's also not a good answer. There are times when you must say, okay, there really isn't anything out there that I'm familiar with. This might be a time. And I'm talking about, it's so few and far between. This is a whole new horizon of things that we've never seen before. Like, for example, GPS trackers. When GPS trackers came out, it was the Wild West. I mean, we were slapping these fuckers on everybody's cars. And I warned people, and I wasn't trying to be like a dork. I was one of a cop's cop. And I said, we're asking for it here. I mean, there is going to be a significant Supreme Court decision on this, and you're going to have to get warrants for GPS trackers. Well, they said, what do you suggest we do? I go, just get warrants now. So this way, when this whole thing gets overturned, we don't lose 68 cases that we built up for the last 4 years because we never went and got warrants because it was the Wild West. That'd be a time in history where I'd say, err on the side of the caution, go get the warrant for any time we're intruding upon somebody's what we consider to be protected rights. But at the same time, just because a car is parked in a parking lot doesn't mean, because you didn't read case law on when probable cause and the automobile exception comes into play, that because you didn't read it, that you got to just play it safe. Guys, like, that's one of the biggest misconceptions in criminal law, is that a car, merely because it's parked or discovered in a parking lot or on the street, but there's no occupants or nobody has the keys to drive it off right then and there, that the automobile exception somehow gets dismissed, but it doesn't. And there's countless cases in this country that say, if you encounter this, a search would still be authorized. Here's why. Here's what the U.S. Supreme Court said in all these cases, in Dyson and LeBron. And so that is like when I hear somebody say that, I'm like, well, that's stupidity. But if we're not barking on something new, like, hey, what about these Apple AirTags? There have been no cases on this. What do you think? Like, well, let's talk about that, because now we're going to have to look at what happened in the past. This happened with IP addresses. This happened with a lot of things. Mm-hmm. So as new technology arises, that's when you're really getting into your new interpretations of how much Fourth Amendment is protected through technology and our new resources and tools that we have as law enforcement officers. And I don't need to sound long-winded. I just got in these rants. So I'm going to let you go. I'm going to judge. That's all. Now the prosecution can, but I have other things to talk about, but you could speak to that.
Well, so we're seeing that not nearly with enough cool stuff like Apple AirTags, but we're seeing that twofold here in Illinois. And I always tell my officers, we're going to get this no matter what. And so the one thing we're fighting right now is probable cause on the smell of burnt cannabis versus raw cannabis. Ridiculous. But that is what it is. But so I had officers go, okay, I'm just not going to search on the smell of marijuana anymore. That's not the precedent I want to set with that. And there's not a lot of case law right now in Illinois. Obviously, we're expanded on that in the United States with different issues, but they, I just said, you need to just document in your report a totality of the circumstances. We're not just going to stop searching motor vehicles based on the smell of cannabis, because the issue we were running into is that I asked my officers, have you been trained on the difference between raw and burnt cannabis? And a lot of their answers were no, because when they were in the academy, that wasn't an issue. So obviously long-term, we would focus on that. But at this moment, we are in a place where we have to decide, are we just going to stop searching motor vehicles until our court that doesn't run very fast, makes a decision on what that is, and we lose a bunch of cases? Let's just approach this from a totality of the circumstances. So I asked them to identify if there was shake in the motor vehicle, if they observed actual cannabis out somewhere, or items that are commonly used for smoking marijuana. Now, again, that's not illegal so to speak, in depending on the age of the individual or things like that in Illinois. But it can get us to that probable cause level. And so we approached it from a totality of the circumstances portion instead of just, we're going to stop doing that, because I don't want them to stop doing that. I want them to continue to do the work that they've been doing along that avenue. The second thing we're seeing kind of similar to that is passcodes to phones. When we get search warrants for those, is that identifying information? What do we, the way we've approached that, we just came up with a way. We meet with each other and I tell, my officers, this might be fought, but let's think about what they would fight. Is this a motion to suppress? Let's think about if we were a defense attorney, what would we say? And so in all of our search warrants for that, based on our Illinois case law, we put that we are wanting the passcode and we will not use it as an identifying feature, because that's when we get into, self-incriminating and displaying that person owned that phone. So we always put in our search warrants that this is for the ability to access to the phone, and not that we are going to use it as evidence that person owns the phone. Now we'll use items that we get from the search warrant, but in trial, we never bring up that person gave us the
access the phone.
So, you
almost give them like amnesty on that in some sense.
Yeah. I mean, so we try to kind of accommodate and come together to figure out, like, what if I was a defense attorney, what would I say about this? What would I do about those things? So that way, when defense attorneys sit down with their clients and go through our discovery, I hope they feel like, well, I had an argument, but here it is in this search warrant right here. We're not gonna be able to argue that anymore. And the more times happens.
Good. I'm sorry.
The more times that happen, I hope that, I don't know that this happened, but I hope that as that client goes through that with their defense attorney, it's like, well, they covered their bases, or we look prepared. We look like we know what the pending case law is, as we should. My documents reflect that, as well as my officer's actions. And that's always the goal.
Hey, everybody. I'm Heather Gloglich, instructor here for Street Cop Training for the course, The Complete Female Cop. This class is not just for females. It's not just about gender-specific issues. It was really formed in order to allow people to find that passion again for policing, to understand that their self-identity doesn't need to be changed just because they want to fit the mold, and to really help bring about change in the profession, not just for women, but for everybody, to be heart-led servant leaders. If you're interested in taking the course, you can visit streetcop.com and search Heather Gloglich, and you'll be able to find it. I'm also really excited to announce that I have a new course coming out. It's going to be called Be the Change. Some of the great feedback I got from this year's conference in Nashville was that the men in this profession didn't feel like they wanted to take a spot away from the women that they work with for my first course that I teach. And so I was really able to sit down and put together a course about culture change and building effective teams and learning about a growth mindset versus stagnation mindset, pushing forward and just being the best cop that you can be, both personally and professionally. So really excited for that to be coming out soon. Keep an eye out for it. Thank you all so much. Stay safe and be the change.
I tell people when they take our case law classes or proactive patrol, which has a lot of case law built into it, guys, this whole thing is about removing defense strategies. That's all we're trying to do here, if you really think about it in some sense. My friend Scott, who was an attorney and where I used to work, he would say to me, because he was a friend of mine, he'd say, when I get cases that come in here, when your name's on them, I almost laugh when people are like, how are we going to fight this? Like, how are you going to fight it? I'm going to read it. And I know that we're beat. And they're like, well, what do you mean? What are we going to be able to do? And he's like, well, I don't know. You gave a post-Miranda confession on a traffic stop, and he followed it flawlessly in accordance with the law. So now you admitted to everything after you were caught. He literally explained everything perfectly. He knows exactly what he's doing. And so I was very confident. I think I gained the reputation of, like, one, the prosecutors liked working with me because, I'm saying I had the most substantial cases in the world. But from a patrol standpoint, I think they appreciated the fact that I think they were learning from me too. Hey, why'd you do that? Well, because of this, because you can't say it this way, understand this. And I'd have to give them a lot of guidance because I was reading the case law and I know they weren't. So I emphasize one of the big reasons you want to continue to educate, and it's so simple to begin education around case law, is because you do take the wind out of defense sails. I mean, why are you going to do all this work for the bridge to completely collapse, right? You're going to spend all this time, energy, and effort trying to find this great thing. And believe me, folks, if you're a crappy cop and you happen to trip and fall across something that is a significant piece of evidence in a major, major issue, like the gun that was used in the homicide of a police officer, but it was found so sloppily, and there's a good chance of a suppression coming, you're going to get pro bono attorneys that are going to look for this as low-hanging fruit, and they're going to be able to put on their business cards, hey, I just got to go out for murder charges. Come pay my $25,000 retainer fee. I can do the same for you. So they're looking for this low-hanging fruit, and they take these cases on pro bono. And folks, if I was an attorney, this would be a strategy I'd be using. I would just be perusing through some major cases, and a lot of you would get a lot of stuff suppressed. But to add on to why case law is important, what you don't realize is when you violate the Fourth Amendment, that opens you up for civil litigation. So what can you talk about that a little bit?
About like the side of civil litigation.
I mean, like when you do not, and again, the court doesn't want to hear per se or necessarily that you didn't know, they didn't give you the training. Here are the rules. You follow them or you didn't. And if you don't follow them, you are subject to having to pay legal damages for civil rights violations of the person who, albeit is probably a criminal, is going to get a payday because of your inability or your police administration's indecision to train people appropriately. It's amazing to me that they'll say, we don't have training money, we don't have people to send, we don't have no solution to this. But as soon as they have to cough up 100 and a quarter, 150 grand in a civil litigation case because of a bad decision made by a police officer, oh, suddenly we found the money. Well, why wouldn't you take that 150,000 and invest it early on? I don't know, in the form of 5 to 10,000 to get your people the training to avoid not only that fee, but the public black eye of our cops don't know what they're doing. They've had no training. And if you think you rely on the academy, you're out of your goddamn mind. So speak about the civil litigation side of it a little bit. Like, what is the detriment of not knowing constitutional case law when you're acting as a police officer? And how much, again, maybe not personally be on the hook, but how much is your reputation on the hook, and how much is your agency on the hook?
So obviously I have kind of a unique viewpoint on this, because if my fiance were to ever, be in that position as a police officer, I will tell you that he is one of the best he quotes case law at me sometimes, and we have like case law arguments. I'm just like, that doesn't fall under that. And I love it. Actually, the first time I met him, he was a police officer who had done a report, and I was reviewing it, and I said, oh, I don't know that we would charge this based on, it being a spoon. It was a spoon. And he was like, well, that I didn't need a warrant or anything. It was under this. And I was like, hold up. I wasn't implying that it wasn't, that it was in an automobile. So automobile exception. And I wasn't saying you couldn't search the vehicle. I was just asking that because I didn't know if it had drugs on it or not. And that's what we were looking at. Right. So, but with the civil portion of it, if he didn't know his case law, he could put, us at risk for, our family at risk. But from a professional standpoint, these officers are my family. I view them as that. They all have families to go home to. And so without knowing those, I'm putting, the community that's connected to them as their family at risk if we don't have proper training. And that can trickle down. I obviously hope that no one ever gets in a position that it's that serious, but being undertrained is terrifying for not only your community, but I've had conversations with throughout my career with officers where I can't charge something because I have to have a conversation where I would say, I would really be putting you at risk, or we need to talk about this. And we are not a wealthy county, but I am a firm believer in that money for training is there. It's anywhere. If you're willing to work hard enough, there's grants, there's federal things out there. I paid my own way to Street Cop Conference. And so I believe my fiance.
I appreciate it. I hope you feel you got your money's worth.
I did. No, 1,000% I did. And I've done that over and over because it's important.
Me too. Guess what? Me too. Just so you know, and I'll put it out there. I'm part of an organization called Founders Mastermind, and it's a group of mastermind. So I'm constantly trying to grow the business to serve everybody better. And to be honest with you, even myself, right? Like, so it's not only serving me better, it's serving everybody else better. And I spend money. I bought 50 books to get time. And Matt Higgins was recently on our podcast. Matt was a guest on Shark Tank. I'm not a contestant, not somebody should pitch. He was a guest shark on Shark Tank.
Oh man.
Yeah, talk about an investment. I mean, and then we got set up with his guys, and like we're friends now. So for the $1,500 I spent on his books to connect with him on a 15-minute private meeting, it turned into a friendship. He came on the podcast. He's helped us. So anytime you invest, sometimes you're getting a real bang for your buck, and sometimes you're getting just a couple nuggets and you don't think it's worth what it is, but you'll never know until you go and do that. But to be part of Founders Mastermind, it's significant. It's a significant expense. But I got to tell you, next week, 3 of my members we went to Mykonos, Greece recently. We went there and we spent time, we broke bread, we goofed off with each other, but real friendships were developed. And some of those guys are like, yo, man, you get time next week, I'm going to pop open the hood on your business and take a look inside. Like, what value for what I paid that I'm going to have somebody who's eons ahead of me to take a look at things to make things better for all of us. Or I could have said, no, I don't want to spend the money. So people say, oh, you're trying to get people to buy these courses. Guys, my courses are a fucking bargain.
And I will be the first to say that they're worth everything. I'm not trying to make an advertisement for you.
No.
But I met Heather. I'm going to mispronounce her last name. Golich.
Glogolich.
Thank you. I'm not going to try it again. I'm sorry. She was
amazing.
That's okay. And I talked to her for a couple minutes about some stuff that, I was really passionate about, talking about domestic violence and women in leadership roles. And I just, maybe we took a picture together. She told me about one of the things she was doing the night after she spoke. She hopped on a different call, and that 5 minutes of a connection was phenomenal for me. And I came back from the training feeling like my deputy that was with me, those create contacts, connections, even if it's not something you learn from a class, which I learned a ton from the classes, but those connections that every day, operating together, seeing, just people's passion when they leave there. Those are all priceless things. And I will never stop investing in my community and my education ever. And I hope that leaks over into the police officers, because there's always money to be had. And or investments to be made, to invest in your future, to invest in, I always want to become a better attorney. I want to, be able to have the knowledge that I need to wake up to that 2 a.m. phone call to tell them if they can or cannot search him, or can or cannot, because to circle back to the civil things too, if I don't know it, I'm setting them up for failure too. There's prices to being the end game, and there's also, a great gift to it too. But, it starts with being an example and being different, and showing them that, because we're in a different age with police officers, we just are. I don't know that it's the most enjoyable thing, but I don't think that it's going to leave, unfortunately, because we're just developing. And so classes like the ones that I've been to with Street Cop have been just phenomenal. The connections and all the things that we were able to bring back to this community were something that I never want to stop investing in. And I hope that my community of police officers feels the same way.
Well, I appreciate the sentiment. And I think that taking a position like that in 2023, going into 2024, is admirable and brave and courageous. And a lot of times we are faced with adversity where sometimes we want to just go, maybe it's just easier to go with everybody else, but it's not, and it's worth it. And everybody's got to pay their dues. And I'm sure you have plenty of stories of you paying your dues to get where you have become, where you have made it to where you are now. How important is it for a prosecutor to have a relationship? This is going to be a 2-part question. To one, have a relationship with the law enforcement agencies, which he or she oversees. But number 2, have the open mind to listen to some of the concerns and work with those agencies.
This is an out of court question, which I think is awesome, because, that communication and that fixing any issues that exist, that's an out of court thing. Every once in a while you'll get a case where it makes it obvious that, hey, this agency isn't doing what they're supposed to be doing, or, but putting that to a stop before it gets to a start is so important. So your relationships have to be twofold. You have to be able to have a relationship where you can say, I don't think that's the best way to go about that. We've kind of talked a lot about, supporting police officers and do all that stuff, but I would hope that my team would be the first to tell me, I think you're off base here, or, hey, you went a little much here, because that's, I mean, I'm passionate about what I do. And, I hope that if I were to ever, maybe be arguing something that doesn't apply, or, be kind of missing the picture of a domestic or something, that they would be the first to tell me, I don't think that that's what we should do. And they do. For example, I just had this happen to me today. I had something typed out that I was going to charge. I was talking to the officer about it, and he asked me, have you watched the body camera footage? And I was like, no, the report was pretty clear. We're just getting started. And he's like, I don't think this case is there. It was inconsistent. And he starts talking about some of the things that were captured by the body camera. And I immediately went, oh, he wasn't afraid to tell me that maybe I didn't understand correctly. And, I immediately went, well, you would know. And I said, I'll take another look at it, but I'm not going to pursue this at this time. And, that starts from the bottom. That starts with not court things. That starts with having a good relationship with them, with knowing that you have an open door and not just a blanket support or a blanket, policies or, understandings of, hey, we don't, arrest for that, or we don't file those charges. So that starts behind the scenes. And so you have to always have an open door and be receptive to criticism. You can't be someone who's just like, I'm right all the time, get out of my office, I'm charging this. Because I wasn't there, I'm going to have to be calling officers, lay people who saw what those officers saw. So their word is always it. But, we have to create a relationship where I can trust that. And so having that open policy there will overflow into the community, because then we don't have to have all these, well, that wasn't charged, or this didn't have the outcome the community wanted. And we don't have to have those explanations. So, that trust will overflow into your community. So your positive communication within your agencies and your prosecutor's office will overflow into your community, because then you don't have anything to, not that anyone's hiding anything, but you don't have any issues that the public doesn't understand.
As a prosecutor of a county now, obviously coming from being an assistant prosecutor, and you guys are state's attorneys, right?
Yeah.
So being an assistant state attorney is called ASA. Is that what you guys call them?
Yes.
So prosecutors, district attorneys, state's attorneys, county attorneys. I don't think there's a fifth. That's all. I think it's all of them I got.
That's right.
How did you have to transition from your position as an assistant state's attorney to now leading your prosecutor's office or your attorney's office, state's attorney's office, my apologies. And do you do any kind of work in continuing to develop your communication skills and leadership skills?
So when I came from a county called Henry County, which is like our neighboring county. And this is my home county, where I was born and raised, and now I live. And I don't want to say just an ASA, but, state's attorney has a bunch of different roles, which I'll kind of transition to. But I was in juvenile court and felony court. I did those two specializations when I was in Henry County. And, I was what I would say just a prosecutor, as in I showed up, I prepped my criminal cases, I prepped my juvenile cases, and that's what I did. And they are a larger county than the county I'm a state's attorney in now. But I only have one assistant here. They are made up of a 5 attorney office. So they're much more specified roles. But I did just that. I did the criminal side. I did the trials, all of that. When I came over here, it's much more a big picture, as in I do all of the lawyering or drafting for our county board. So all of our county ordinances, I go to a majority of the meetings. So I go to our road commissioner meetings. I go to, our zoning meetings for zoning properties in the area, or rezoning or restructuring. And I do, since I've been here, we've established a drug court. I established a drug court in my county, from top to bottom. So, we, as a state's attorney, I feel like you focus on your community as a whole, as well as prosecution. So I do all of the felonies. I still do all of that here, but I have a bigger picture of all of the other things, of the training, of public relations, of appearances, of going to events. It never ends. I'm never not the state's attorney here, no matter whether I'm at my house, whether I'm in my office, whether I'm out in public. I carry that with me everywhere, I think. So, and I don't mind that. It's one of those jobs that I don't think ever leaves you. It's something that I'm always on call. I got a call this morning at 2 a.m. from an officer, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I don't think that this job can be done without, that kind of attention to all of those things, because, in 2 weeks, my officers could call me about a zoning issue, about an order of protection. It seems very minimal, but again, it's back to that. If I don't know what I can tell them about what's going on in our county, I'm setting them up for failure, for ill advice, for something that they make a choice on the street that puts them in a position where someone's furious at them or puts them in danger or something of that nature. So I feel like my role here is much different and much more of a bigger picture of like a totality of things. And to answer your final question, to keep that going, there always has to be some goal of growth. Of what do we need to do next? What is the next project? What is the next thing that's really in need? And we just keep going and just keep a list of the things that we can improve or that maybe we need to revisit, or where that needs to go. Because you always have to have a direction. Otherwise, you're just wandering around.
Okay. My last question for you is a message to law enforcement. What would you like to say to the law enforcement community as a prosecutor and even as a human being?
Well, my first is always that we see you and we support you. I tell my officers all the time, I wouldn't have a job if it wasn't for you. If they don't bring me good cases, I can't move forward with that. So, I think to recognize that we see you, we support you as both a prosecutor and just a human. And I hope that, I want to be the reason that they want to continue to be good, because there's so many, all those bad stories hit the news, officer arrested, officer did this and that. But for every one of those that exist, there's people going to your classes, there's people trying to be better, and there's officers that want in this field still, despite the bad, to be good. And, to keep being that good, because there will be prosecutors out there that want to support you and want to be part of the change too. I know it feels like that's not always the case, but it is.
I think that we often see, and I say this over and over again, we see these very, very sliver fraction of the worst of the things this country has become. And I think we tend to forget to look at the bigger picture, because I've met many prosecutors that are just head over heels in love with their officers. Most of them are, to be quite honest with you. Are you going to find that in Philadelphia? No. You're going to find that in New York? No. You're going to find that in LA and Chicago? No, you're not going to find it there. But you will find it in pretty much everywhere else in the country. And the country is a very, very big place. And for the most part, prosecutors are on our side, and we continue to appreciate them. And, if any prosecutors are listening, humility is a fantastic trait as a prosecutor. It doesn't diminish your qualifications as an attorney. It allows us to have a conversation where you can hear us out a little bit too, and might say, I didn't actually see it that way, or maybe I misinterpreted something. Because even me, somebody who people consider to be a reliable resource, I'm very comfortable in admitting when I'm wrong. And I would actually kind of take pleasure when I'm like, I fucking got that wrong. I didn't realize that I got that wrong. And I would say that publicly. So I think it's an important trait to have humility. And the one thing I say that because the one thing I've seen a lot is that there isn't much in the lawyer field in general. I'm not just saying just prosecutors, the lawyer field in general. And it's always a comforting feeling to have successful attorneys who are kind as well.
Thank you. I've wanted to do this my whole life. This is something I'm very passionate about. But like I've said, kind of the whole time, I view it as much more of a team thing. I can't do this alone. So even if I, was the smartest person, it's not my decision. I'm not the smartest person, but we're a team, and we present it to the person who's going to make the decision. And so, that's how we have to come together. And, I'm very passionate about this. Because I, open up and listen and want to talk and all that doesn't mean that I'm not a fighter. But we have to have a balance.
I can't thank you enough for doing this. And I think the dialogue here was important because we showed everybody, or set an example of how it can be and how it should be. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate you as a human being. And I appreciate the support and the kind words you said about this company as we try to do the work. And just know that we're not right next door to each other, but we're all on the same team. And knowing that you're out there, it gives me a lot of great comfort and reinvigorates and refreshes me in the work that we're doing, because sometimes we get jaded. I had a tough Monday, Tuesday. It's a Wednesday today, and I feel fantastic. And I'm reminded of why the work is so important. So thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I have been excited since the conference. So if there's anything Illinois can ever do for you, I am happy to be a connection to pass along to anyone that I can help or be of assistance to. I'm happy to give out my contact information if there's any time I can do something.
You just Google Grace Simpson and find state's attorney. What county?
Mercer County, not Mercer County, New Jersey.
That's actually the county that we're in. You know that?
Yes, I know. When I Googled it, I was like, oh my gosh, that's hilarious. But yeah, I'm actually Mercer County, Illinois.
Sweet. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Guys, if you're in an area where you're trying to get to our classes, but we're not close to you, fret not. We actually have on-demand training at streetcop.com. You can take that course online right now, and then you could attend that training in the future at no additional cost. You can redeem your voucher, so you get 2 for the price of 1. We don't want to deny you the ability to take this training now, especially knowing that it can keep you safe, at a very minimum, putting bad guys in jail where they belong, and at the maximum, going home to your family. Check out streetcop.com for that offer.